What if the children you loved, raised, and sacrificed everything for were never yours? What if every smile, every bedtime story, every "Dad, I love you" was built on a lie? In today's story, one man discovers that the 4 children he raised for over a decade were not his, and the shocking truth was revealed in front of everyone. This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about deception, revenge, and the price of truth. You're watching Cheating Stories 7. If you enjoy stories filled with drama and raw emotion, don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more gripping tales. Now, let's step into the devastating story. I raised 4 children who weren't mine and exposed the truth in front of everyone. It started with a smile. Not mine, not my wife's. My son Michael had just turned 13. We threw him a surprise party, friends, family, balloons, everything a teenage boy could want. I thought it went off perfectly. He looked genuinely shocked when he walked through the front door and a dozen kids screamed, "Happy birthday!" A week later, I stopped by the pharmacy on my way home from work to pick up the prints from the party. Old school, I know, but I liked physical photos. Something about holding a memory in your hand made it feel more real. When I got home, Rachel, my wife, wasn't there yet. The house was quiet, the kids were scattered somewhere upstairs, so I sat in my office and began flipping through the pictures. At first, it was just joy. Michael laughing, Emily tossing cake into her sister's face, even our dog somehow wearing a party hat. But then I came across a photo that made my fingers stop moving. It was a close-up of Michael and my best friend, Greg. They were standing side by side, both smiling at the camera. It should have been just another happy moment, but something didn't sit right. I looked closer. Same hair color, same shade of green in their eyes, same angular jawline, same dimple on the left cheek when they smiled. I tried to shake the thought, but my stomach turned. Michael didn't look like me, not really. People had always said he looked like his mother, but now, seeing him next to Greg, I saw it differently, and I hated that I couldn't unsee it. I pushed past the photo, but a few shots later I found another one. This time it wasn't about resemblance, it was about proximity. Rachel and Greg were in the background, blurry but unmistakable. Their faces were close, too close. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, and his eyes were locked onto hers with an intensity I'd never seen before. It was a look you don't give your best friend's wife. I sat there for several minutes, the edges of the photo digging into my palm. Was I overthinking, projecting? After all, they'd known each other for years. Greg had been around since college. He was Uncle Greg to the kids. We took vacations together. He helped us move. He stood beside me at our wedding. But now, I wasn't sure I really knew him at all. Rachel came home not long after. She kissed my cheek, said she was exhausted, and headed upstairs to change. Same routine as always, except now I was watching closely. I tucked the 2 photos into the bottom drawer of my desk. Not because they proved anything, but because they sparked something I never thought I'd feel toward my wife. Suspicion. And once that seed was planted, it started to grow. It started with a smile. Not mine, not my wife's. My son Michael had just turned 13. We threw him a surprise party, friends, family, balloons, everything a teenage boy could want. I thought it went off perfectly. He looked genuinely shocked when he walked through the front door and a dozen kids screamed, "Happy birthday!" A week later, I stopped by the pharmacy on my way home from work to pick up the prints from the party. Old school, I know, but I liked physical photos. Something about holding a memory in your hand made it feel more real. When I got home, Rachel, my wife, wasn't there yet. The house was quiet, the kids were scattered somewhere upstairs, so I sat in my office and began flipping through the pictures. At first, it was just joy. Michael laughing, Emily tossing cake into her sister's face, even our dog somehow wearing a party hat. But then I came across a photo that made my fingers stop moving. It was a close-up of Michael and my best friend, Greg. They were standing side by side, both smiling at the camera. It should have been just another happy moment, but something didn't sit right. I looked closer. Same hair color, same shade of green in their eyes, same angular jawline, same dimple on the left cheek when they smiled. I tried to shake the thought, but my stomach turned. Michael didn't look like me, not really. People had always said he looked like his mother. But now, seeing him next to Greg, I saw it differently, and I hated that I couldn't unsee it. I pushed past the photo, but a few shots later I found another one. This time it wasn't about resemblance. It was about proximity. Rachel and Greg were in the background, blurry but unmistakable. Their faces were close, too close. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, and his eyes were locked onto hers with an intensity I'd never seen before. It was a look you don't give your best friend's wife. I sat there for several minutes, the edges of the photo digging into my palm. Was I overthinking, projecting? After all, they'd known each other for years. Greg had been around since college. He was Uncle Greg to the kids. We took vacations together. He helped us move. He stood beside me at our wedding. But now, I wasn't sure I really knew him at all. Rachel came home not long after. She kissed my cheek, said she was exhausted, and headed upstairs to change. Same routine as always, except now I was watching closely. I tucked the two photos into the bottom drawer of my desk. Not because they proved anything, but because they sparked something I never thought I'd feel toward my wife. Suspicion. And once that seed was planted, it started to grow. The idea came from the news. A missing child's body had been discovered in a nearby lake. The only reason authorities could confirm the identity was because the parents had previously submitted the child's DNA to a national database. It was a tragic story, but it gave Rachel an idea. "We should do that too," she said over breakfast. "For the kids, just in case something ever happens." I nodded slowly, my spoon frozen halfway to my mouth. "What brought this on?" "That news story," she said, pouring juice like it was just another Tuesday. "If anything ever happened, I'd want to know, wouldn't you?" It was the perfect opportunity. "You're right," I said. "Let's get it done." I volunteered to take the kids to the family clinic after school that Friday. Rachel smiled and kissed my cheek. It felt like betrayal, just under the surface. At the clinic, the kids were playful, unaware. I signed the forms, provided consent, answered medical history questions. When the nurse returned with the swab kits, I asked for one extra request. "I'd like copies of the results," I said, "to keep in our family safe." The nurse raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Of course, a lot of parents ask for that now." 3 days later, the results were ready. I stared at the sealed envelope for hours. I held it in my hand like a live wire. I wanted to open it, and didn't. I placed it in my desk drawer, took it out, placed it back in. I waited until the house was empty, until the kids were at school, until Rachel was at work, until my hand stopped shaking long enough to tear the flap. What I saw stole the air from my lungs. None of the children were mine, not Michael, not Emily, not Grace, not Lily. All four shared a biological father, but that man wasn't me. I sank into my chair, the paper trembling between my fingers. My eyes blurred, but not from tears, from disbelief, from nausea. From the sense that the entire narrative of my life had been quietly edited, rewritten behind my back. I hadn't just been cheated on, I'd been replaced, erased. And worst of all, I had loved these kids with every ounce of my soul, raised them, changed diapers, sung lullabies, helped with homework, lost sleep over fevers, bled and broke for them, and none of them were mine. I closed the envelope and locked it away. I didn't scream, I didn't break anything. I just sat there still, while a silent truth settled over my life like dust. And I knew from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, lights off, glass of scotch in my hand, the DNA results beside me on the coffee table like a loaded weapon. I had read the document 10 times. Every line still said the same thing. I was not the father of any of the 4 children, and worse, they all had the same father, which meant this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was deliberate. This was a lie built and maintained for over a decade. The next morning, Rachel left early for errands. The kids were still sleeping. I walked into our bedroom, opened her side of the closet, and began going through everything. Not out of anger, out of necessity. I needed clues. I needed confirmation of what I already feared. That's when I found it. A small bag tucked in the back. Lingerie, new, expensive. I had never seen it before, never touched it. I would have remembered. More evidence. Not hard proof, but enough to keep going. I thought back to the birthday party photo. Greg, my best friend, Uncle Greg to the kids. He had the same eyes as Michael, same smile, same voice pattern even. I had brushed off the similarities for years because I trusted both of them. Rachel was my wife. Greg was my brother in everything but blood. But now it all made sense, and I needed to know for sure. That same day, I drove across town to a private clinic under a fake name. I asked for a sperm count test, not because I questioned my ability to have children, but because I wanted numbers to back up what I was starting to suspect. The results came in 2 days later, high sperm count, no fertility issues. So if Rachel and I had spent years struggling to get pregnant and she suddenly got pregnant easily without even trying, what changed? The answer wasn't medical. It was biological. It wasn't me. It was him, Greg. I had enough evidence to build a theory, but I needed certainty. That's when I crossed a line. I walked into a specialty electronics shop and bought a full set of surveillance equipment, motion-activated cameras, sound recorders, GPS trackers. I installed the cameras throughout the house, hidden, discreet, perfect. And then I tracked her. I placed a GPS device under Rachel's car, another under Greg's SUV. If they were meeting in secret, I'd know. If they were still seeing each other, I'd see it myself. This wasn't about paranoia anymore. This was a search for truth. Because truth, no matter how ugly, is still better than being lied to for a lifetime. I didn't tell a soul. The cameras were small, barely noticeable. I hid one in the living room lamp, another behind a row of books in the study, 2 more in the guest bedroom and our own bedroom. Audio recorders under furniture, inside drawers. Nothing was left to chance. By the end of the weekend, the house wasn't a home anymore. It was evidence collection. I installed GPS trackers under Rachel's car and Greg's SUV. Both were synced to a private server I accessed through my laptop, stored behind encrypted firewalls and hidden directories. It looked like a digital ghost town. No one would stumble upon it. I became a quiet, patient observer of my own life. At dinner, I asked how her day went. She smiled, said it was fine. I nodded. Meanwhile, her tracker showed a 2-hour stop at a hotel off I-87. Greg's tracker stopped at the same hotel. Room 217. I didn't need a camera in there to know what happened. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons followed a similar pattern. Sometimes she came home with shopping bags as a cover. Sometimes nothing. Always the same routine. Always the same room. But what broke me wasn't what happened outside the house. It was what they did inside. The guest bedroom, the one I thought we only used for out-of-town family or sick kids, had become their second nest. The cameras caught them clearly, too clearly. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They were always here when I wasn't. The footage was silent, but it screamed in my head every night I watched it. What haunted me most wasn't the betrayal, it was how comfortable they were, how familiar. Greg wasn't awkward. He wasn't nervous. He moved around my house like it belonged to him. He kissed my wife in our hallway. He used my shower. He tucked his shirt in while standing in the same kitchen where I made my kids breakfast every morning. Rachel laughed with him. She looked happier than I'd seen her in years, as if I had been the intruder all along. One night, as I sat in the dark, watching the grainy footage of them kissing in the guest bedroom, I realized I had crossed a line I could never come back from. But I also knew one thing with absolute clarity. This ends when I say it ends, and it would end loud. It was a Sunday night like any other. The kids were winding down, the dishwasher humming in the kitchen, Rachel folding laundry on the couch. I was pretending to read a book, but my mind was replaying footage from earlier in the week, her and Greg again in the guest bedroom. I hadn't confronted her, not yet. I needed it all. I needed to be surgical, strategic, unforgiving. Then she dropped a bomb I didn't see coming. "Ethan," she said, not looking up, "I think I'm pregnant." My fingers tightened around the edge of the book. Pregnant. We hadn't been intimate in months. I could barely look at her without picturing her with Greg, and now she was pregnant. I forced my expression to remain neutral. "Really?" I asked calmly. She smiled nervously. "Yeah, I took a home test yesterday. I plan to go to the doctor tomorrow just to be sure." I nodded slowly. "That's big news." She waited, clearly expecting more. Hugs, celebration, joy, but I gave her none of it. Inside, my mind was spiraling. I thought about the years we spent trying to conceive Michael, how we'd seen specialists, tracked cycles, adjusted diets. She cried every month her period came. I held her through all of it. And now she was pregnant, easily, accidentally. After I had already confirmed the other 4 weren't mine, she had to be kidding, or just didn't care anymore. I didn't speak much for the rest of the night. I told her I was tired and went to bed early. She didn't seem to notice that I left the lights off in the hallway. She didn't notice the way I stared at the ceiling, fists clenched under the covers. She just smiled like she was holding onto the last secret she thought I hadn't uncovered. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm, dangerously calm. Let her go to that doctor's appointment. Let her think I was still in the dark. Because soon, very soon, she was going to learn just how much I knew. And that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The next morning, Rachel left early for her appointment. I smiled and kissed her on the cheek before she walked out the door. She thought it was affection. It was a farewell to the last thread of trust I had left for her. I waited 30 minutes, grabbed my jacket, and drove 2 towns over to a private clinic. No one would know me there. I gave them a false last name and requested a male fertility assessment. I didn't need it to confirm anything, but I wanted the final nail in the coffin. The test took 20 minutes. I sat in the waiting room afterwards, staring at a fish tank bubbling quietly in the corner. The receptionist handed me a sealed envelope, but I didn't wait to open it. I ripped it open in the parking lot. Above average sperm count, no signs of infertility. I sat in my car for a full 5 minutes, unmoving. This woman, Rachel, had spent years convincing me that we were struggling. That conception was a miracle when Michael came along. We tried so hard for years, and I had believed we were battling infertility together. But now, she got pregnant effortlessly, and the baby wasn't mine, just like the other 4. When I got home, the kids were doing homework and Rachel was in the kitchen, humming while stirring sauce for dinner like everything was fine. She turned to me with a gleam in her eye. "Doctor said I'm about 6 weeks along. Isn't that exciting?" I nodded and kissed her on the forehead. "Very exciting." She smiled, unaware that her entire world was standing on a cliff edge. That night, after everyone went to bed, I opened my laptop and checked the tracker logs. Rachel had stopped by the doctor's office, yes. But then she went to the same hotel she'd been meeting Greg at for weeks. Room 217. Her car and Greg's SUV had been parked there at the same time for nearly 2 hours. I clicked play on the video feed from the guest room 2 days prior. Same movements, same routine, same betrayal. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of it all press down on me. She was pregnant with Greg's child. Again. But this time I wasn't going to stay silent. This time I was going to burn everything down. It was Friday. The same pattern. Rachel told me she was running errands, then meeting a friend for lunch. Greg's schedule, according to what I knew from years of friendship, was miraculously flexible on Fridays. By 10:30 a.m., both trackers were on the move. Greg's SUV left his neighborhood and headed east. Rachel's car followed the same path 20 minutes later. Both stopped at the same hotel. Again, room 217. This time, I didn't just watch on a screen. I got in my car. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't think. I just drove, one hand gripping the wheel, the other clutching a folder with printed photos, video stills, and GPS logs. I parked across the street from the hotel and waited. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I was done being hurt. Now I was just cold. At 12:40 p.m., I saw them. Greg exited first, adjusting his collar, looking smug and unbothered. Rachel followed 2 minutes later, sunglasses on, head down. She paused, glanced around paranoid. She didn't see me. I snapped a photo through my windshield as she got into her car. Then I started the engine and drove away. I had everything I needed. The footage, the tracker logs, the hotel timestamps, my fertility results, the DNA report. But now I had the last piece, my own eyes. That night, Rachel was unusually cheerful. She cooked dinner, joked with the kids, poured me a glass of wine. "You've been quiet lately," she said with a wink. "Everything okay?" I smiled. "Everything's exactly where it needs to be." She leaned across the table. "I feel like something big is coming. I nodded slowly, meeting her gaze. You have no idea. While the hotel meetups were predictable, the most painful betrayals happened under my own roof. The guest bedroom, once reserved for visiting family or a sick child, had become their personal playground. I had hoped it was occasional, a fallback when the hotel wasn't available, but the cameras told me otherwise. Tuesday, 11:03 a.m. Greg enters through the back door. Rachel greets him at the hallway with a kiss, casual routine, like it was just another Tuesday lunch date. They disappear into the guest bedroom. The door closes. Thursday, 10:58 a.m., same scene, different clothes, same betrayal. I had named the files by date and timestamp. At first, I only watched snippets. But then I noticed the patterns, their ease, their rhythm. The way she changed the sheets afterward, reset the pillows, opened a window like she was erasing guilt with air freshener. They weren't just having an affair. They had built a system. She texted me after one of their trysts. I miss you today, can't wait for dinner tonight. I stared at the screen, disbelief turning to disgust. The guest room cameras caught the moments between, him walking half-naked to the kitchen, her sitting in a robe, scrolling through her phone, laughing together at something only they understood. They never rushed, they were comfortable. That's what gutted me most. Not the sex, the ease. The intimacy built inside my home while I was at work, building a life for the children I thought were mine. They had stolen everything, my trust, my family, even the space I considered safe. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. 2 more pieces of evidence, 2 more nails in the coffin, and only one final act left to stage. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon. The house was quiet. Rachel thought I was out playing golf. The kids were scattered between their rooms and friends' houses. I was, in fact, sitting in the basement, headphones on, watching the audio feed download in real time from our home's landline. She never knew I had bugged it. That's when I heard it, Greg's voice, casual as ever. Are you comfortable talking? Rachel laughed. Yeah, Ethan thinks I'm out shopping. I paused the audio, hit record, and leaned in. Greg continued. He's been acting strange lately. You don't think he's found out, do you? She scoffed. He hasn't figured out anything in 15 years. Why would he start now? I clenched my fist, steadying my breath. She kept going. As for Michael, she said, he's turning out more like you every day. My hand froze on the desk. Greg chuckled. You're sure he hasn't noticed the resemblance? Rachel's voice dropped to a sultry whisper. He still thinks I'm the perfect wife. He'd never suspect I'm cheating, or that I've always made sure my kids weren't his. My breath left my lungs, she said it. Out loud, admitted to intentionally conceiving all 4 of our children with Greg while married to me. Greg sounded nervous. I'm not sure I'm okay with that. Rachel's tone sharpened. Take it back or you'll never touch me again. He caved. Okay. I take it back, I'm sorry. She softened. That's better, I can't wait until Tuesday. I can't Tuesday, he said. Lunch meeting, big deal. Then we'll need a long Wednesday. I sat there as they scheduled their next betrayal. It wasn't just infidelity. It wasn't even just lies. It was a conspiracy, planned, executed, and maintained for over a decade. I let the audio finish recording, then backed it up to 3 locations, USB, cloud, and printed transcript. That conversation, more than anything, was the kill shot. And I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just going to leave her. I was going to make sure everyone saw exactly who she really was, and I would deliver that truth in person. I walked into my attorney's office on Monday morning, a thick folder in my hand. Marital infidelity, he asked, flipping through the first few documents. I want a divorce, I said, my voice steady, and I want it loud. He raised an eyebrow. Do you have proof? I slid the folder across the desk. Inside, DNA tests confirming I wasn't the biological father of any of the children. Audio recordings of Rachel admitting she intentionally conceived with another man. Photographs of her and Greg entering and exiting the same hotel. Video stills from our guest bedroom. GPS tracker logs. The air between us went still. My lawyer let out a low whistle. You've been busy. I've been patient, I replied. Now it's time to be deliberate. Do you want a file immediately? Yes, and I want her served at a very specific time. And forward, go on. I explained everything, how Greg and Rachel met every Tuesday and Thursday, how this Tuesday they'd be meeting at our house in the guest bedroom like always, how at 11:30 a.m. they'd be fully unaware. I want the divorce papers delivered to her at 11:45, I said. Right after. The lawyer nodded slowly. We can arrange that. Then I added one more detail. I want witnesses. His eyebrows rose. Who? Rachel's parents, her sisters, some of our close friends, Greg's wife, Greg's boss, maybe even mine. I'll tell them it's a surprise baby announcement. There was a pause, then a smirk. That's vicious. She took my name, my trust, my future, and my children. I think I'm entitled to one performance. He nodded. If they don't know what they are walking into and you don't record or publish it, it's legally fine. Perfect, I said. I left the office and made the calls that afternoon. Everyone responded the same way. A surprise baby announcement? Oh, how exciting! No one suspected. No one had any idea, but soon they'd know everything. And the people who once called her daughter, sister, wife, and friend would never look at her the same again. Tuesday morning arrived with eerie calm. I told the kids to stay at a friend's house for the day. I took the day off work. I made sure everything was perfect. At 10:45 a.m., guests began arriving. Rachel's parents, her two sisters, a few of her close friends, Greg's wife looking excited. Even Greg's boss showed up holding a small gift bag. They all gathered in the backyard, chatting softly, smiling with anticipation. I kept my voice low and warm. She's been resting inside, I said. Let's wait until everyone's here. We'll sneak in together and surprise her. By 11:25, the final guest arrived. Everyone stood quietly as I motioned toward the sliding glass door. Follow me. We crept through the hallway. No one asked questions. No one sensed anything. The guest bedroom door was half shut. I paused, placed my hand on the doorknob, turned to the group, and whispered, "On three." Surprise. They all nodded eagerly, suppressing laughter. I opened the door. Surprise. The room exploded with gasps, shouts, and dropped jaws. Rachel and Greg were frozen mid-motion, tangled in the bedsheets. Rachel screamed and clutched the sheet to her chest. Greg tried to dive for his pants. His wife dropped the gift bag. Rachel's father turned pale. Her sister's mouth fell open in slow horror. I didn't say a word. I stepped aside and let Dave, my lawyer, walk in. Calm, emotionless, briefcase in hand. He cleared his throat, opened a folder, and spoke in a firm, measured tone. Rachel Bennett, you are hereby served divorce papers filed by your husband, Ethan Bennett, on the grounds of infidelity. She sobbed, shaking. Dave continued. Supporting evidence includes photographic documentation, recorded conversations, and DNA test results confirming that none of the 4 children you've raised with Mr. Bennett are biologically his. Everyone was silent. Rachel's mother sat down hard on the hallway bench. Dave turned to Greg. You, sir, are named in the suit as a co-respondent. Greg's boss stepped forward, voice low. You're fired. Greg looked like he might vomit. Rachel begged, Ethan, please, can we talk? I shook my head. Talk? You had 15 years to talk. I'm done listening. Greg's wife walked out, no words, just a shattered stare. The rest followed, slowly, stunned and murmuring. I turned to Rachel one last time. You lied, you stole my family, and now you can explain it to all of them. She collapsed onto the bed in tears, still half covered in a sheet. I walked away down the hall, out the front door, past the shocked stares and silent judgment. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt free. The days that followed felt like something out of a slow-motion explosion. I didn't hear from Rachel, not that I wanted to, but I did hear from everyone else. Her family, humiliated. Her mother called me crying. Her father refused to speak to her. Her sisters messaged me privately to say they had no idea, that they felt sick thinking about it. Greg's wife filed for divorce within 48 hours. Greg lost his job the same day. Word spread quickly through the company. Sleeping with your best friend's wife and fathering 4 kids behind his back didn't exactly scream leadership material. Rachel was fired from her marketing firm a week later. Something about reputational damage. HR speak for no one wants to work with someone like you. The surprise party went viral within our social circles. No one had recorded it. It was never my intention to post it. But word of mouth spread like wildfire. Some were horrified, others quietly admired the precision. I wasn't proud of what I'd done, but I didn't regret it either. My lawyer called a few days later. "She's not contesting the divorce," Dave said. "And given everything, DNA results, adultery, financial deception, you're in a strong position." We negotiated terms. I kept the house. She got nothing but a small car and what little was in her personal account. There was no custody to fight over. I wasn't the legal father of any of the children, a brutal fact, but one that protected me from future battles. Still, I didn't abandon them. The kids were devastated, confused, hurt, but I promised them quietly off the record that I would always be there for them, that no matter what their birth certificate said, I was the man who raised them, and that mattered more than DNA. I didn't seek revenge in court. I didn't push for jail time or press criminal charges for fraud or paternity deception. But I did sue Greg in civil court for intentional infliction of emotional distress and for interfering with my ability to have biological children with my own wife. The court awarded me a hefty settlement. It didn't erase the pain, but it paid for therapy, for the kids, and for me. Rachel tried reaching out. Once, I saw her in the grocery store, her eyes red, her hair unkempt, shoulders slumped. She tried to say something, maybe an apology. I didn't stop walking. She had already spoken enough for a lifetime. Rachel's world didn't just crack, it collapsed. She moved in with her sister temporarily. Her parents refused to speak to her. Even the few friends who hadn't witnessed the party firsthand slowly stopped answering her calls. She tried applying for jobs, no one bit. Small towns have long memories, and hers was now tied to betrayal, scandal, and a 5-child affair that left a trail of broken families behind. Greg, divorced, fired, publicly humiliated. His wife took the house, full custody of their 2 kids, and moved across the state. I heard through mutual friends that Greg was living in a rented apartment near the highway, working part-time at a car lot and sleeping on a pull-out couch. I didn't laugh when I heard it. I didn't feel joy. I felt closure. But the real victims in all this were the children. Michael, Emily, Grace, and Lily didn't understand at first. They knew something had changed. They knew Greg wasn't just Uncle Greg anymore. And when they found out he was their biological father, it turned their world upside down. Maya, Greg's daughter, was stunned to learn she had 4 half-siblings she had grown up calling cousins. It took time. Therapy sessions, late-night talks, school meetings, shaky weekends filled with questions like, "Are you still our dad?" Yes, always. I wasn't their father by blood, but I was the man who taught Michael how to ride a bike, the one who held Emily during her first panic attack, the one who braided Grace's hair before school and who stayed up all night with Lily when she had a fever. I wasn't going anywhere. They chose to stay with me most weekends, their choice. Rachel was allowed visits, but they were infrequent, awkward. The girls were distant, Michael angry. They didn't call her mom the same way anymore. She had betrayed them, too, not just me. One night, Michael asked, "Did she ever love you?" I looked at him and said, "Maybe, but not enough to stop hurting all of us." He didn't ask again, and that silence was louder than any scream. Letting go isn't as cinematic as people think. There's no dramatic music. No storm outside the window, no final shouted argument, just silence, just the sound of your own breathing in a house that suddenly feels too big. After everything, after the exposure, the divorce, the fallout, I thought I'd feel relief, and I did. But grief still found a way in, not for Rachel, not anymore. That part of my heart had hardened long before the ink dried on the divorce papers. No, I grieved for the man I used to be. The one who believed in her, who trusted too easily, who thought love was unbreakable just because it was once pure. I found myself walking past our old bedroom, forgetting for a second that it was empty now, that she wasn't there, that the laughter, the whispers in the dark, the routines, they weren't real. Or maybe they had been once. That was the worst part, because I hadn't just lost a marriage. I had lost a life I thought I was living. I stared at photo frames with smiling faces and wondered, Was she pretending in this one? Did Greg already know by then? Were those arms around me? Already lying. Some nights I'd catch myself remembering her laugh, and I hated that I missed it. I hated that, despite everything, some part of me still clung to the memory of her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, the way she used to curl up beside me after a long day. But memory doesn't ask permission. It just shows up, uninvited. And yet, in that ache, I found clarity. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant forgiving myself, for trusting her, for loving her, for staying too long. And when I finally accepted that, when I stopped blaming myself, I finally started to heal. I waited until the time was right. Not until they were old enough, but until they were ready. One Saturday morning, I sat with all 4 kids at the kitchen table. No phones, no distractions, just cereal bowls, orange juice, and a conversation we couldn't avoid anymore. Michael spoke first. "You said we could ask anything." I nodded. "Yes, and I'll answer." He hesitated. "Is it true that you're not our real dad?" The words hung in the air. Emily looked down. Grace bit her lip. Lily leaned into me, not fully understanding, but sensing the weight of the moment. I took a breath. "It's true," I said softly. "Biologically, I'm not." They were silent, but everything that matters, the moments we've shared, the love I've given, the things we've done together, that's real, that's forever. Michael's eyes narrowed. "Did Mom know?" "Yes," I said, "for a long time." "Did Greg know?" Emily asked, her voice small. "Yes," Grace whispered. "Why didn't anyone tell us?" "Because they didn't want to lose control," I replied, "and they didn't think I'd ever find out." Lily asked the hardest question of all. "Do you still love us?" I felt my throat tighten. I reached across the table and held all their hands. "I will always love you. I may not have given you life, but you gave me a reason to live. You are and always will be my children. That's a promise I will never break." Tears welled in their eyes. They didn't say much after that. But one by one they got up and hugged me, tightly. No words, no conditions, just love. And in that moment I realized something I hadn't dared to believe until now. Blood may define where you come from, but love defines who you belong to. It had been months since I last saw Rachel. The town's small enough that eventually paths cross. It happened in the cereal aisle. She looked older, tired. Her hair was messy, eyes hollow. She wore the same coat I'd bought her 3 birthdays ago, back when I still believed in forever. She spotted me before I could turn away. "Ethan," she breathed, like saying my name hurt. I didn't respond. Just kept my hand on the cart handle, eyes fixed on the rows of granola boxes. "I've wanted to talk to you," she said quietly, but I didn't know how. I finally looked at her. Her face crumbled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't expect forgiveness. I ruined everything. I know that." I nodded once, calm, controlled. "I loved you," I said. "I built a life with you. I trusted you with everything." She blinked back tears. "And you threw it away, all of it." She nodded, lips trembling. "I still see the kids," she murmured. "They are different now. They don't look at me the same." "Because they see now," I replied. "They finally understand." She looked down. "I miss them." "I believe you," I said. She looked up, hopeful. "But that doesn't mean you get them back." Silence. I pushed my cart forward, slowly passing her. No anger, no cruelty, just truth. And as I turned the corner at the end of the aisle, I whispered one final thing. Some things can't be undone. Sometimes I catch myself remembering the good years. The early ones, before the lies, before the DNA tests, before I ever doubted. I remember Rachel's laugh echoing through our first apartment. The way she looked at our newborn son, my son, I believed, like the world had stopped just for him. I remember late-night drives, road trips to nowhere, dancing in the kitchen barefoot while spaghetti boiled over on the stove. Were those moments fake? No, they were real to me. And maybe in her own way they were real to her too. That's the hardest part of betrayal. It doesn't erase the past, it rewrites the meaning of it. You're left wondering which smiles were genuine, which touches meant something, which "I love yous" were honest. But I refused to let her lies steal those years from me. Because in those years I was a husband, I was a father, I was a man who gave everything, and I'm proud of that. I walk into my home now, and it's different but not empty. The kids still visit, they still call me Dad. Diana, a woman I met during this chaos, has become a steady light, patient, Gentle, she doesn't ask me to forget, she just helps me live again. We laugh now, we build again, and when I look back, I don't feel bitterness. I feel gratitude. Gratitude that I found the truth. Gratitude that I walked through fire and came out whole. Gratitude that I know what love is, because I once gave it to someone who didn't deserve it. And now, I give it to people who do. And so the truth finally came out. 4 children raised in love but born from betrayal. A wife who built her world on lies and lost everything when those lies collapsed. This story reminds us betrayal always has a price. Lies can last for years, but the truth will always find its way out. What would you have done if you were in his shoes? Would you expose everything or walk away quietly? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us here on Cheating Stories 7 for more powerful tales of love, lies, and revenge. Until next time, remember, the truth always wins.